What we need to do.
Okay, looks like I'm getting the clearance here, Corey, that we are live. Um, and just double checking here. So, welcome to Quantum Leap with David and Corey. Corey, did you have a slight technical issue that you're sorting out? Oh, no.
I would just like to be using my good microphone, but for some reason it's not connecting, so I'm going to have to play around with it. All right.
Okay, we got high quality audio from you, and I know I feel a little rusty getting back here, but if you're just joining us, it's David and Corey, and our say that again, Corey. Okay, our first episode back here with Quantum Leap, and
Test. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Test.
You're good. I'll let you know if there's an issue.
Okay.
So today we're going to be going over our plans for the fall for the show. But first, I wanted to have Corey introduce himself and tell us who you are, Corey. You know the drill.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Cory and I, and I am co-owner of Take Wing Coaching, along with my business partner and wife, Yale Knott. And I am a business coach, and I am focusing largely on business partnerships.
Okay, very good. And my name's David Kirsten. I'm a video producer, and I do some other things as well. And this purpose of this show is really for business development, but also really just a program for success on how to achieve in your areas. And we've kind of evolved that a little bit. I do think we focus mostly on small business and entrepreneurs with a lot of our guests, but the content that we do, we can really be applied to a number of different things. And I'll just say a brief check-in for us since we've been off the air since the late spring. I think the end of April we usually end, and I really took a long summer break and probably just worked part-time all summer, which was kind of nice. But I did work on a number of new things that we're going to be talking about, and not all of them are finished yet, but I'm excited to be back and be sharing some of this new content. And Cora, I was just going to see if you had any check-in about kind of where you've been with your business, and we did off there about new things or horizons you're looking at, and we can talk more about later too if you want.
Yeah, no, really. I think we started talking about this before we went off the air. I'm focusing more on partnerships, and I'm mostly pivoting to doing that only just because I realize I like working with groups more than individuals. Love working with individuals, but there's so much more dynamics between people when they're trying to collaborate, and or even just the dynamics of learning from each other.
Yeah, great. And we're gonna dive a little bit more into the nitty gritty there. I know we kind of work as business partners in some aspects and collaborators. You know, every collaboration is different. I just love how you're really helping partners who actually have a formal agreement, which the hardest part is to really get started. I see so many partnerships get stalled out, and you really have this ability to keep people moving and get that vision and the trust, you know. So we're going to bring on some people at some point, and your brother and other people who are familiar with how you work to kind of give their testimonials. And you know, at first, we're going to go over some books later on. I really wanted to give kind of an overall crib sheet for this show about if you're new to the show or you're looking at doing a new venture or setting some new goals, just like a recap of kind of where we've been and where we're going. And I do have some specific programs that are really coaching programs that are also, I'm planning to put them out as books or audio programs. And, you know, one of them, probably the first, will come out early next year. And that's really based on the Rising Star program, which is really a program for success, almost modeled a little bit after this handbook, the U Squared, which is the impetus for this show. An early version of this book used to be called Quantum Leap. So, really, this concept of quantum leap, which is the basis for this show, for how do we take kind of being where we are and making a leap to where we want to go. And, that's really what I like to share on this show, the mechanics of how to get started, how to do it. And I have a whole program on that Rising Star that's really aimed for younger folks. It's really developed in collaboration with a lot of what Cory taught me and teaches. And then we have the newest program is called the Thought Leader. And I really see Cory as a real thought leader on a lot of these issues, even more so than me in certain areas. But really to teach that to the younger generation about how to become a thought leader. And there's about 12 modules, and we're going to be previewing that program. It's not all the way done yet. Again, most people probably won't get all of the entirety of the program unless they take it as an individual coaching program with me, which is by referral, or when the book comes out. The last piece is industry leader. And I know, Cory, you're familiar with all these, and we've talked about them more or less. We're really just introducing them now. And that's really about how to position yourself as industry leader. And this is something we've really developed on the show in terms of the conceptualization and really your experience in B&I and my kind of a lot lesser experience in B&I, who I really see are industry leaders as small business owners, but then to really be kind of a what we would say is the actual industry leader, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Elon Musk. That's a whole different level. How do you get on that path? How do you even start thinking about that? So that's really what the industry leader program's about. And stay tuned for more on the calendar there coming up. And Cory, I just wanted to pose a question to you about how you specifically help business partnerships and kind of what if business partners are looking at getting into partnership. I've really found so much of what I do is done better collaboratively, that all the changes in my life came when I learned how to collaborate with others. So I just love this partnership idea that you're working on. And I just wanted to see if you could introduce that concept, kind of how you came up with that as an area, a focus for you, based on being a business coach. You also can coach, individual business owners. If you've coached me a lot over the years. So.
Yeah. I've always kind of been in partnerships since I started my business, and for good or bad, I don't know that any ended in disaster. Some worked really well. And of course, the one I have now with my wife is working really well. And sometimes it's just a collaboration. We launch something and do something for a bit, and sometimes it goes on further. But I think what I found is that it's so much easier when you have somebody who has, complementary skills. I'm kind of sit in the middle of things. I can do some sales, some marketing, I can do programming, I can do those things. But when I have somebody who goes deep on those, it is so much easier for me. And just having somebody to talk to and about the business who's actually kind of an owner in the business is a big help. But the problem is, I started out kind of thinking about this when I was with Ascentive, because we were working with people doing collaboration, mainly for referral marketing. But we always talked about referral partnerships, where you'd have such a great relationship with another business owner that you could basically move your clients right onto their calendar and get them signed up. Like, you can almost sell their business. And as people were doing that, I saw how much they struggle with building relationships, even just going out and finding somebody and developing that trust, and then taking it all the way to that partnership level is a huge challenge. And a few people came to me and said, hey, I want to work better with my partner, or better with my family, or, this family business is a little bit crazy. Can you help me with that? And I find it works better when it's equity owners, or where everybody has a, full stake, versus sort of that team environment. And so I started developing this methodology around it. And Gail and I got coaching, and I incorporated some of what he did with us as partners. I liked the style, if not some of the the things that they did, and taking everything that we learned or I learned about relationship building and incentive, standard business coaching, and just knowing people, and also working on that life coaching and executive coaching that I trained in. I've got this methodology for developing partnerships. And I think there's a lot of people out there who want it and they just can't make it work. Right? They find somebody to work with and things fall through. They find somebody to work with and they get everything started and they spend a lot of money and then it falls through and then somebody's on the hook to keep it going. So I'd like to prevent that. And I think there's a possibility, but there's not a lot of people out there who coach partnerships.
No, agreed. And it's such an innovative idea. And I think it also teaches you how to work with other people as collaborators. I know you've talked about maybe writing a book on collaboration, because we've learned so much about collaboration, not on this podcast, but also in BNI with a lot of the other people we collaborate with informally. I think that's really taught in Business Networking International's organization, for example, this concept of power partners. How do
Mm-hmm.
you work with people? You're completely separate entities. You're not even in a formal partnership, yet that person could be equally almost important in your business as anybody else. So how do you move to that level? And we've learned that from BNI, from a lot through doing, but also from people like Ivan Meisner and Mike Macedonio and Don Lyons, who have really basically wrote the book on that.
Yeah, and if you look at even what they've done, a lot of them have partners. I mean, some of the best um, BNI regions, usually there is a partnership there. Sometimes there's one owner and then somebody who does a lot of the work, but they're treated like a partner, right? They have a fair amount of autonomy. Again, that's not what my ideal is, but the idea behind BNI is very collaborative. And I think we've learned a lot from that. And I think we can take that to the point where, maybe somebody isn't looking to do a lot of networking, but they want somebody in their business who runs it with them. And that is a challenge. There's a lot of challenges there, but the payoff is huge. I mean, I think that the sum of what two people can do is going to be greater than generally what one person can do. There are some really dynamic, amazing individuals out there who can run great businesses and know how to enroll the right people, but most of us aren't those. we're not those high-powered entrepreneurs of the world. It's better for us to have somebody who's got our back.
Yeah, I mean, I think where the world's gone to, it depends on the industry. For example, if you're a tennis pro or a golfer, maybe you can go it alone. But if you want to win the Super Bowl or the
Right.
World Series, you got to really learn to work as a team. In a lot of ways with front office and
Yeah, even
different
the front
play. Yeah,
office and all those people, they all have to work as a team too. It works best when they are. Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, love the sports analogies. Now, I just wanted to shift gears a little bit and introduce kind of a line of really research and, probably my favorite one, the thing, I've done communications for 20 years, and the big aha moment for me that came this spring and really kind of pushed me a little bit off working on some of the other stuff that I was, really studying this author, Donald Miller,
Mm.
on how to grow your small business. And he's an internationally recognized coach, and lives in Nashville, Tennessee. But really, he has a couple great books if you're new as an entrepreneur or you're looking at making a leap with your small business. Check out his work. There's another couple people, Mike McAllowitz and I think it's John Gerber. Hopefully, I'm not getting that name wrong, but that really Jesse Schmidt, who's kind of our part of our power teams, turned me on to this author, and it really is kind of life changing. Um, his small business stuff is great, but the thing that really caught my attention is, and the thing that he's really the most known for is like one of those 6 business steps. He uses the analogy, the airplane, which we use, for sales and your products. And we have a great visual for that. but this concept of story branding is, I think, where he's really broken the new ground, and it's called Building a Story Brand. And he has a book called Building a Story Brand. And I pick up both these books. You can read there's about 50 or 60 pages in the How to Grow Your Small Business on the story brand that's in color that'll give you the formula for it. And there's this whole book is on it, but it's really a revolutionary concept and system that, combined with what we already know, can really put you head and shoulders above anybody else in branding. And I think really where it starts is with a video, like an elevator pitch, and your website. And those are the pieces I'm focused on helping people with. And the concept is unique in that most people approach their businesses, saying, I'm the best at this, or I'm the electrician who's great at this, and here's why. And they go into their resume, or maybe your sales. But people care about that some, but if you give them too much, it's really a shift in that you don't want to be the star, but you want to be the guide. You want to guide people about how they can help you. People don't want to hire a hero, they want to hire a guide. And I think it's such a powerful concept. They want Obi-Wan Kenobi, not Luke Skywalker, for example. And I'm going to do some more detailed presentations on this framework and what I learned from it, but I've already started using it, and he really has it down to a science that's so powerful for small businesses that if this is really the first thing you should work on, is getting that elevator pitch down, a 30-second, a 60-second version of this. We can do it in a video and then have that correspond with your website script and kind of your closing sales copy, everything that goes out in your emails and all your marketing stuff. And there's really a system to it. It's very airtight, and it's just a beautiful system. So do check out those books. He's also available, has like certified coaches all over the place that can help with that. But I don't know if you have any concepts on any ahas that might have open for you, Cory. I know you've heard me talk about it a little bit. You've been studying it, and we both know a fair amount of communications, that it's really how you kind of apply it. I think people can pick up the book and apply it themselves pretty easily.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I just it's yeah, I highly recommend reading anything that will help you get more focused on your business and give you the ideas. And there's some really good, just basic books like that one, and Story Brand, which I've been working on, because my thought leader, consultant, marketing person suggested that I do my website that way, and it's made a lot of sense. So less of a focus on me and more on what is the client concerned about. Yeah.
Yeah. I do know there's a little bit different variations, and then I see if you're going to be more of a visionary or like a public speaker, it's fun to have that star aspect. People want kind of a star public speaker. Or if you're going to be an actor or a celebrity, that you're it's different branding. But I think for the most part, small businesses, corporations, people are not hiring like, they don't necessarily, Tony Robbins is great, but they don't want to necessarily, they're a little bit intimidated by that. They're hiring somebody, is more gonna, how are they going to help them for their goals? They don't care if you're, some all-star,
Right.
this or that. They care about how you're going to work with them, how they can trust you, connect with you, identify with you, how you can take them to what they want to accomplish, not
Right.
like what you accomplish, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be challenging, with having somebody who's sometimes they're more of a mentor than they are of a coach. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we can use all these people, I think, in our lives in one way or another. But I'd say for people paying for something, a service, that's the most important thing. And, it's changed my whole thinking on getting more the distinctions between the different kind of character traits and how people should market themselves depending on what they want to achieve and their personality and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I was talking to a public speaker the other day, and We were talking about some of these distinctions, so it really gets you thinking. For example, of somebody who maybe wants to move from being a entrepreneur to a visionary or a public speaker, what that entails in terms of how you market yourself, the differences. And I know you've studied some of that as well. So
Yeah, there's definitely different ways. I mean, not so much the marketing, but there's also the mindset. I mean, even just having an entrepreneurial mindset. I was just also talking to somebody the other day who's sort of a fractional CEO, and he'll come in and he helps people with business successions. And he says his chief frustration is that most people selling their business do not think like entrepreneurs, and so they don't. There's a lot of value in their business, but they don't know how to draw it out because they're the ones doing everything, and they don't know how to get out of their own way. And so a lot of these times these businesses just don't sell, because they don't have the ability for the owner to not be there anymore. And a new owner would have no idea really. No, most new owners aren't willing to take that. Potential new owners aren't willing to take that risk. And so I think that it's the same problem throughout. When we want to shift what we're doing, is shifting our mindset to being that thing. What works in one arena doesn't work in the other. And that's a lot of the work that I do. And I think that that's also true in the partnerships. It's a big problem because what works for me as an individual may not work for my partner. So we have to find out what is our thinking patterns, and how do we resolve conflicts? How does the other person do that? And then make a map. It's just basically building a map for success. And it's true no matter what you're doing in the business. Yeah. But a lot
yeah,
of times
no,
people don't want to build maps. So,
yeah, well put. Well, I for the last part of the show, and I know we'll probably end here within about 10 minutes, just a time check. I wanted to go over like some of the key books that really I'd say span kind of the crux of this show. And, you know, we can talk a little bit about them, or I'll say a few words. And if you have anything you want to say, just chime in briefly. And I'm going to go through them pretty quickly because I don't want this to be boring. But I do want to give people an opportunity. If you're looking to get started, there's so much material out there and things that say, get rich quick, just schemes that when really to find big changes in our lives, it's really like almost like finding a needle in the haystack. The certain things that connect with us, and maybe not all of these you'll connect with, but these are books that really were life changing to me, and opening up a new kind of opportunity and excitement. And I think the people who have turned me on to these books and read them have agreed with me. I'd say in short that we talked about mentors that really inspired this show. I'd say Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, which has probably started, the whole self-help industry. Hopefully I'm on. I don't
yeah,
know if you can see
yep,
that.
you're doing great. Oh, sorry. Oh, see, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna put us on side by side. So Think and Grow Rich here. That was written in the 30s, and it's really just a program for success. And some of the handbooks I'm going to put out just really kind of update this with some of the new information, but not necessarily in all the detail here. But I've listened to this book on Audible, probably like and read it about 10 times in the past few years. That as we mentioned, the U Squared handbook, 36 pages on how to make a quantum leap. Those are the big ones if you only pick up two books. Um, and after Napoleon Hill, who was alive in the early first part of the 19th, the 20th century, kind of the person who took over after that was Earl Nightingale in the 60s, and he rose to prominence and actually had a radio show that I like to increasingly base this show after, called and he wrote a key book called The Essence of Success. And he actually didn't write this book. This is all from his shows. So he did his whole system is a series of radio shows, and it was just it was a game changer in the 60s. He created basically the whole Nightingale Conant Corporation, and the whole self-help industry was created, the modern industry, from him and all his inspirators, if that's a word. um, and then Bob Proctor, I would say, I believe, and maybe Tony Robbins and John Maxwell. They're a little bit more niches, but I'd say Bob Proctor would be kind of a successor to Earl Nightingale, who actually studied with Earl Nightingale, and he wrote this book called "You Were Born Rich," which is a great place to start on Audible. Um, a great publication. So I know we're getting pretty deep into some of this stuff. Another few books. I do, Tony Robbins is kind of in a league of his own. I think some of the sensationalizing, I really feel like he's modernized a lot of this in terms of like in-person programs that Bob Proctor did as well, but Tony Robbins has his own take, and just a really influential, one of the most influential figures in the 20th century in this kind of thought and formula for success. So this is a great place to start. This book, it'd probably charge you $10,000 for an hour, maybe not quite that. That was written early on in his career, but what's in this system is powerful stuff. Just a couple, and then a new book, Limitless. I don't know if you've heard of this book, Cory, Jim Quick. We've said it on the air, really about how do we increase our capacity. For example, my new trainer, when we first got started, said you want to increase the engine, and then you're going to burn more calories, you're going to be stronger, you're going to feel different. So how do you go from like kind of a two-stroke engine to like a V8 with more horsepower, and how do we do that in our lives and our potential and our capacity? And I'd say this book is a great, really kind of a famous author and book on how to do that. But all these other books that I mentioned, look at that more or less, but I think on this show, that's one of the themes as well.
I'll give it a few.
Yeah, listen to it on Audible, or just a little bit, even if you listen to certain chapters. It's one of those books you can listen to in the morning just to kind of inspire you and get you in a good headspace for doing your work. And the last thing, since we're giving people kind of a crib sheet about, as a professor, I like to think of, things in terms of courses. So this is really the required reading, so to speak, for Quantum Leap, or
Sure.
we'll say it's optional, but
I have a few books I can give you too.
okay, yeah. If you have them ready, you
Yeah,
can you can share them. Let me just share one more, and then
yeah.
let's hear from you. Um, Be Water, My Friend. So this was written by Shannon Lee about Bruce Lee's thought, and this was the inspiration behind my Thought Leader program, which is a beautiful book, probably one of the most life-changing books that I've read in the past couple of years. Um, and really powerful book, very, very accessible, and also on Audible too, a great version narrated by Shannon Lee, who's just brilliant, both of them. Yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Cory, if you have any comments on those, or just where books in general. I know we were talking, you said you actually like fiction more, which I thought was
I,
great.
I'm more of a yeah, but I'm more of a historical fiction and long, deep, dives into history of things. So I like, I'm a very people observant person, and I think if I can find somebody who's really good at observation, that works for me. A lot of Russian literature, all those different things, different cultures, um, which gets me more into the headspace of how people think. But business books can be so good at the systems and processes and putting together how people think into something more. And so a couple of things that I've read over the years, and I was telling David that the problem is I'm so ADHD sometimes that when I start reading a business book, I get so many ideas I can't keep reading. And so I want to start doing things, and or I just go to sleep because it's just too much. But a few books that I really like. One I read recently is The Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief by Chris Cooper, and he goes into just basically the stages of the entrepreneurial uh, business. Just really helpful to think about, because sometimes we want to jump far forward when we really ought to be thinking about where we are in the entrepreneurial journey, the business journey, and focusing on those things. Because if we get too far ahead, it's challenging, and that's where being visionary also helps. He doesn't talk a lot about vision, but a lot more just the the formulas and processes to put in place each stage of the business. Um, Getting things done was one of my favorites, David Allen. And if you want to talk about being water, I like the sort of the mind like water idea, which is, having all of your ideas and all your thoughts and all your to-dos and everything on paper. Because the more we keep things in our head, the more we're shuffling around in our thoughts. And I have found that to be more life-changing when I practice it as much as possible. Tipping Point with Malcolm Gladwell, that's kind of one of those old books that just, it's universal, and really how to be somebody who connects, or just how to treat others, right? Sales, you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar, by Sandler. So Sandler sales, relational sales system is amazing, and I love his stories in that book. Just it's thought provoking in terms of the way we think of sales and the way we ought to think of sales. One that kind of comes up on my radar a lot is the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. It's also a good way to kind of think about, how do I not have to put in so much work on my business, right? Because boy, if you can replicate those ideas, you can have multiple businesses running at once, and you see that with people. And then one that there's two that really kind of come out that David ought to mention, just because we're so heavily involved in B&I, is The World's Best Known Marketing Secret. And there you get much more into, and while it seems like it's marketing, and then there's a story brand, I think what you learn in there is really how to interact with people, and not only interact with people, but to stand in your place as, this unique business owner. So your why and your vision, and then how to take that to the world and build your tribe. And along with that is The Room Full of Referrals by Don Lyons and Don Lyons, Ivan Meisner, and of course I can't think of his name right now, but he did a lot of the DIS system. And so if you take that with The World's Best Known Marketing Secret, you'll learn how to talk to people in the way they want to be talked to. And it's just what I love about The Room Full of Referrals, if you can find it, is that it's not just the information, it's like a lot of just words to use. Like, it's just a handbook, a cheat sheet, as you will.
Yeah, that first book, just to clarify, was Founder, Farmer,
Tinker.
Tinker Thief. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just say my own experience with some of these books is, it's not necessarily how much we read. It's more,
Right.
I think, getting the right books that apply to your life and then taking action on those books. And that's what I see, that you have to have a certain frame around action and, things first for a lot of these to even be, valid. So, the ordering is important, and, it's, so everybody's path is different. And I think you could read those books, none of which I mentioned. You're great on your path. I could read 15 different other books over 5, and, be just as successful and learn totally different, so everybody has a unique path, but I do think there are some similar concepts and things to really look at just what other people are doing, to get outside of our own head and maybe pick up a book that we wouldn't normally look at because it's different, or because somebody else said you should read this kind of thing.
I like a lot of audiobooks too. I love it. So if I'm on a long car trip, business audiobooks are great, because it's just stuff that you can incorporate, gets you thinking, and that can be a good way to go. And a lot of these books that are out there today are derivatives of the ones that David and I have brought up. They're somebody else's take on the same ideas. Anything with Simon Sinek, he has a lot of good stuff too. Leading from on leadership and the why and all that too. So there's so many good books out there. We'll just make a list.
Yeah. And I think that's part of being an expert, is once you study a whole field, you see what the landmark books were. Like, I always like to go to the book that created the whole field. And then you see that maybe there was like 20 books after that, that were all kind of based on that whole system created. For example, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations basically created economics as a field in, like, was it 1760 or something like that? There's it even earlier. I'm a little rusty. So to understand economics, you really got to read that book and look at, the hundred years, several hundred years after that, and up until the present day, and who all the influential people were, and that's what I've tried to do with this success system. But then business success is its own field, and so I think a lot of the books you gave were different from like my field of study about really like the nuts and bolts of business, almost like the upper division versus like the lower division of really just like the mindset stuff. So,
Yeah, I like both. I think if you want to get a mindset too, Brian Tracy, one of the ones I've been listening to is his seminar on power of personal achievement. So it's just bit by bit by bit. He tells great stories. He's fun to listen to, and just a couple of his affirmations are huge. Um, and so I think that's another good one if you want to get up there in the Tony Robbins area. I'm going to admit I'm not a huge fan of Tony Robbins. There's some things he says I don't like, but there's a lot of other good kind of gurus out there. So Brian Tracy is definitely one. Jack Canfield. You pick who you like and you go with that. There's also um, some great female speakers out there. Kendall Summerhawk is one that Gail really likes, and I've been to some of her seminars. Are great. I don't know if she's still doing much. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, there's a great book. I think it's called Bird by Bird on how to write a novel
Oh,
or a
okay.
fiction book. That's an amazing book. I just say what I think makes Tony unique is he's a little bit similar to Bruce Lee in that he's kind of a man of action. So I think a
Right.
lot of people who aren't into reading books, they can just show up at one of his seminars and get a lot that they wouldn't get, if you're not really in. So he's so accessible. But I hear you. There's different things about people that kind of people get along with different people,
Oh,
so to speak.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've had a number of mentors over the years. Some I really like, and some I'm not as close to, and people love them. So we find who we like, and should not feel bad for the ones who don't have the same communication with us. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm gonna at some point we'll put together a reading list,
Yeah.
or I'll try to share some of these books too, in my story, and we'll talk more about them in greater depth. But there's kind of where to get started if you're interested. And I know we're pretty much at time here, so I'm gonna close this out. And I did want to just first end on just a little bit of a recap of who you're looking to work with as your ideal client, Cory, for your partnership business.
The ideal ones really are usually romantic couples. So two people who are about to invest in starting a business together. And because there's so many different angles it could be coming at it from. And so there's a lot of challenges with commitment and conflict, and just now dealing with money and other things. Maybe somebody's already got a business and one of them wants to help. But it could also be family. So family members who are inheriting a business or putting one together, or friends. Two people. A lot of ones I see are coworkers, right? They're coming out of a big company and they might be some flush with cash and stock options and so on. And they're like, hey, let's do this thing together. And it's can be really challenging to get that together and get everybody on the same page. But it's significant investment that they're about to make. And it should be successful. If they have the vision, then all we have to do is lay out the plan. You know?
Great, great. And I'm in the middle of a bit of a rebrand too. So I'd say who I'm looking to connect with. We'd love to hear what people think of the content on the show, or if you have any books that you think we should really look at and mention and study and discuss. You can email us at wideangle@kirsteninc.com. That's no spaces. And I'll try to put that link in the comments. And I do all my business by referral because I find it's the most efficient. People within the BNI system who really want to, take their business to the next level by doing a rebrand. And I also often start that with a video package, but we have a number of, collaborators that I work with, you being one of the most important on, sometimes they think they need this, but what they really need is a partnership coach like you, or they think I might be able to help them with something, but actually what you really need is somebody like Roberta, a branding expert or something. So I'm happy to be a resource to anybody in our network by referral to talk about some of these concepts and really get you linked up with what you need and how we can help,
Yeah.
So, well, great. Well, great to be back. And sorry, I'm still a little bit under the weather, so my voice isn't quite back. But we look forward to having our guests on and talking more about all these great and fun and exciting concepts in the fall here.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.